Now, welcome to a video that's entitled Understanding Garbage Collection. Garbage collection is a process in the .NET framework that will absolutely confuse you when you attempt to read the documentation and put the pieces together. So in the next couple of 3 videos here, I want to really clean that up for you and present it in a way that I hope will make the light come on and you'll understand what's going on with garbage collection. It starts off very, very simple, very easy to understand. When a C# program instantiates a class, it creates an object. Okay, we're all okay there. Now this object gets created and it's maintained out there on the heap in memory in an area that has been created and set aside for the program. So every time a program starts up, the application runs, and as it's setting up, a certain amount of memory is set aside for it. And of course, that object's going to take some of that memory. Now at a certain point, the object will no longer be needed by the program. We'll go out of scope, we'll set it to null, we'll do something, but all references to the object will be set to null. They'll have gone out of scope. The bottom line is the object's not needed by the application anymore. Now the memory that's used to store that object needs to be reclaimed. In other words, it needs to be cleared out so that the application can reuse that memory. Now, the garbage collector solves a problem for us that developers have wrestled with for years, especially in like C++ and those kinds of programs. And that is, the garbage collector will go out and reclaim the memory automatically, because if you don't go get it, if somebody doesn't go clean that out, then the longer your application runs, the more memory that gets used until finally you don't have any memory left and you get a memory error and your app locks up. This is called a memory leak. So the garbage collector takes care of this for us automatically. However, this is where the first catch comes in. It will eventually reclaim the memory. Okay? Now also remember that the garbage collector only deals with managed resources. Now, what's a managed resource? A managed resource is a .NET based object. In other words, it's some functionality that's part of the .NET framework. Now, what would be an unmanaged resource? Something from the old COM world would be an unmanaged resource. Now, keep in mind, some things that would be unmanaged resources could be things like certain files that are open, database connections, and so forth, that the garbage collector is not going to manage. So here's the bottom line. The garbage collector runs automatically from time to time to reclaim memory from old unused objects. Now the garbage collector only runs when it starts to see that the application is running short on memory. So as long as the app's not running short on memory, the garbage collector is not going to run. Now when it does run, it designates all memory that's been used by the program as unreachable. In other words, it's kind of locking the memory down momentarily. It goes through all the references that it can see in that program, and it starts to mark those objects that are out there that the program still has references to as reachable. So just a little second or two there, it locks everything, all the objects, then it goes through and says, okay, do we still have references to these? It marks them as reachable, and when it gets done, it goes back and looks. Anything out there on the heap, any objects that are still marked as unreachable are obviously not being used by the application anymore, and they become candidates for garbage collection. Now, when garbage collection happens, the objects will be removed and the memory will be made available to the program once again. Now, here's the next little wrinkle. If that object has a finalize method coded into it, then the garbage collector calls it to allow the object to perform any necessary cleanup work. So we can put a finalize method out there. We can put any kind of stuff out there that needs to happen to make this thing gracefully go away. Now this all sounds very simple, but this entire process gets complicated by a couple of things. First of all, we really don't know when and if garbage collection is going to run on our application, because it's not executed on any kind of schedule, only when it's starting to run low on memory. It runs when it determines it needs to run. All right. Next, sometimes it's not just the managed objects themselves that need to be removed. The object, the managed object, may have access to another resource that should be cleaned up as well. Think about files that were locked for writing, database connections, and so forth. Sure, we're not worried about so much the memory that database connection object is taking up, and that would be like an ADO connection object. However, think about this. There is an open connection to the database that's still live there, and based on our licensing with our SQL Server, we may be consuming a very expensive database connection that's going to prevent someone else from connecting. So there are two tools you can employ to help objects free all the necessary resources when you need them freed. And that is the iDisposable interface and something called destructors. Now, what I want to do in the next couple of videos is go through this process, and we're going to first talk about iDisposable, and I want to talk to you about some of the code in that, and then we'll talk about the finalize method, and then we'll do a little bit of an iDisposable code example, and then we'll talk about the using statement and kind of tie all of this up where it makes sense and where it doesn't seem just so confusing when you try to read the documentation. Okay, so the basics so far. Garbage collection happens from time to time. It cleans up all managed objects. However, unmanaged objects are kind of hanging out there, and just because we're cleaning up managed objects doesn't mean we're cleaning up other things that the managed objects have created. So that's going to start to be a concern for us. So join me in a video entitled Using iDisposable, and we'll talk about how it helps, and then we'll move on from there.